wrestling school is, you can't learn how to, feed off people and how to let the crowd influence you in the ring, which is something that, a lot of guys don't understand anyway, and a lot of guys could, they could wrestle a lot better, so to say. But being able to work every Friday, having a place, especially a place so close to home, because, they loved me there. That is instant fan appreciation, because, because when I first started, I was planning on, I was gonna, all right, well, maybe I can get a rise out of the fans if I, tell them to, go, screw themselves, and, I'm better than all of them, because I am fairly arrogant. And, it was just great that, that immediately they just, they chanted for me without even knowing my name. It was, that's another thing. Mullet, Joe Dirt, I don't really have to tell people who I am. But, but so really, not just myself, but I think everyone that got to work there regularly, benefited because of that. Because like I said, you don't get to work weekly, a lot of places, because there aren't that many places running more than monthly. And a lot of those places have their set on the roster, So, and I think that's what contributed most to, Josh Rain. Like I was saying, he he solidified himself as a wrestler, and not just as a fighter, not just as a high flyer, not just as, someone that the crowd can ooh and ah at. He solidified himself as a wrestler. He learned how to reverse things, chain with other guys, and that's really helped him along, because, now he's wrestling, everywhere in Central Florida, and, knowing how to wrestle definitely helped him get there, and being able to work every week.
Okay.
On a regular basis.
Okay, so let me go ahead and start asking you some particular questions.
Okay.
And if you could try to give like a 1-minute answer for each, or,
All right.
whatever. So, you were at the first show, so who were the original PWE wrestlers?
Dagan Lee, Josh Rain, Paradox, let's see, Martin, Marvel, Mark Zout, the American Gangstas, J. Nettie Brock. Let's see, who else? Can't even think of his name. Carlton Zero, he was there. There was, it was my first experience, so a lot of I just remember faces, but there were a lot of those guys.
Okay. To skip forward a little bit, how did that compare, and how did that change? How did the product change when they started bringing in the Believe crew?
It got better. Like, a lot of guys complained about it, but, you're bringing in, veterans that have been wrestling for years. You're bringing in students that have been trained by some of the best, and they're coming in, and we're being able to compete with them. That's great. I mean, me personally, it's because of that I got to work guys that I learned a lot from. And I know, once again, Josh Rain, he learned a lot from working those guys. It was a great thing, bringing in more experienced wrestlers.
Mm-hmm. What was your role early backstage?
Backstage, I was pretty much the go-to guy, and that role I don't think really ever changed. No matter who was involved, when the Belief guys and Sean Davis came in, it was still kind of that, I'm the guy, I would flyer, I would drive Martin around when he didn't have a car, I would promote the hell out of it. I would show up early, clean up the arena, set up the chairs. Whenever we needed a curtain, I went out to Lowe's and bought the materials to make the new curtain. I was just that guy, I was, and that's generally how I try to be, it's about paying dues. A lot of guys don't understand that.
Okay. A lot of wrestlers, it was a rotating door kind of through the organization. Why did so many leave?
Many, a lot weren't invited back. Guys would the guys would, beg to be put in, a program with a specific person. They would beg for a certain type of match or something, and they'd be given that, and they would no-show. And they wonder why they aren't asked back. There were a lot of, because there's so many wrestlers, and wrestlers don't appreciate the chance to wrestle nowadays. And that's one of the big reasons a lot of guys didn't come back. Other guys, it was just too much of a drive. There were guys coming from Jacksonville, you know. So that there were multiple reasons.
Okay. What were your thoughts on the feud between Simon Says and Michael O'Toole?
I thought it was gold. Those two guys, they laid into each other. They hated each other, which I thought, it makes for entertaining fights, and the crowd, loved it. The boys loved it. I mean, that was one of the first times the boys would be running around to the front to watch the matches. And, the bloodbath, that, made, Central Florida wrestling history, I'm going to say. People still talk about that.
Okay. What were your thoughts on the hardcore matches between the Gangstas and the James Boys?
There's only really two hardcore ones. They just did a lot of stuff to each other in those. And that's another thing, like the bloodbath, it's kind of become legendary. And whether people think it should or not is irrelevant because it's important to the Central Florida wrestling scene, or important to the wrestling scene, period. Those guys, they went out there with the purpose of we're gonna love the crowd and love the business enough to give 120%. And so you have them going through flaming tables. Personally, I'm not a big fan of hardcore, but that's what it is, man. That's where the devotion is.
Right. Can you tell me about the ring itself?
It's a backyard built boxing ring. A lot of guys complained. I didn't care. Most of us didn't care. It's one of those things guys like to look back and go, oh, we worked on that ring. There were holes in it at times. It was it wasn't a wrestling ring, so it didn't have a little bit of give, but it was a ring. And the chance to wrestle in a ring is better than, anything, in my opinion. There's nothing like getting in there. That's a sanctuary for us. At least it should be.
What do you think PWE could have done differently to stay in business longer?
Martin could have controlled who had control. And I know that sounds weird. And that's one thing I told him a few times, I didn't really speak up a whole lot because, I'm still fairly new. It's not respectful to speak up unless you're asked. And, if I'm not asked, I usually don't. But he didn't really grow a backbone until things really started going down the tube. And that's not a knock on Martin. He was just, when you're promoting a show, you wear a lot of hats, and you can't afford to wear the friend hat. And he learned that a little too late in the game. So what could have been done differently, some of the other guys that had some, creative input on what should happen with Eclipse should never have been given that input. That was, Martin's baby. He should have been 100% in control the entire time. And another thing on Martin, he shouldn't have given control to other people. He should have delegated tasks under his control to other people, and he shouldn't have gone on month-long leaves of absence no matter what was going on in his life if he really wanted that to succeed. So, Martin does have some blame to take there, but ultimately, what could have been done? Control issues. Who had control over certain aspects of the weekly show?
Why did the weekly show end?
Well, Bob and his son Jason, the guys that ran Joe Bob's boxing ring, they decided they wanted to run boxing and MMA without clearing it with the athletic commission, which is a stupid move. And they got stung. A lot of guys in suits showed up and shut them down. And they got evicted that night. They called us and told us the show was still on, even though they were evicted. They didn't tell us they were evicted. And we showed up, the cops showed up at our show, and we found out, oh, we're not wrestling tonight. Okay, and so a lot of the boys went home. Martin, myself, I think Carl Martini, we stayed up, and basically as fans showed up, Josh Rain was there, I think. As fans showed up, we signed merchandise, gave it to them, and said, sorry, but we're done. We don't have a building.
Okay. With with photos by Rob of the bloodbath. That's how I found out about the organization. And the videos that were online brought in a lot of guys like the Bourbon Street Mafia and stuff. How did video affect bringing people in and or the legacy a year later?
Video had a fairly important role. I mean, you know, word of mouth, especially on the internet nowadays, you know, it can make stuff live higher and longer than it really did. Video, however, the videos of PWE, people see, you know, certain things, and you can't refute video. And they saw, you know, it wasn't the best building, wasn't the best ring, didn't have the most fans, but they saw guys go out there and, you know, bust their asses. You know, they saw us go out there and wrestle. You know, we educated the Central Florida wrestling scene once again that there is still wrestling. And, you know, it just exploded from there. People started showing up from the other shows. Fans started showing up from hour and a half away. You know, it was great. You know, video had a profound influence.
Is there anything else you wanted to cover?
Not really. Other than that, PWE was a good thing, and anyone that knocks it, you know, they're trying to get themselves over on the expense of something beautiful, and they should really respect what went into PWE, and they should try to live up to it or surpass it instead of knocking it.
Thank you.